Okay, we're looking at the final method in this section. This is section 5.5 for Algebra 2. And the notes end with this method called solving by graphing. And the explanation I'm going to give you will be based on a TI-84 calculator. So if you've got a TI-84 on your desk, it'll really help because my verbal explanations, you can try them and pause the video. Okay. So what we have here is a quadratic equation in standard form, and you can see it says equals 0 over here. And right above it, I have a quadratic function. And I don't know if you remember, but we did this earlier where we graph these and you get this shape called a parabola. Okay, so what I want to point out here is that these are exactly the same with one minor change. On this side, the top one says equals 0, and this side here, it says y, and on this one here it says 0. So what we have is a y on one and a 0 on the other. Now, since y is a variable, it can be any number you want it to be, depending on the height you're on the graph. But if you were to set the y equal to 0 there, then this function and this equation would be the exact same thing. In other words, if you put a 0 for y, you would end up with a quadratic equation with equals 0. So it'd be in standard form. Now, the only place on a parabola or any other graph where the y value equals 0 is where it hits the x-axis. So that might be 3, 0 there, or it might be negative 4, 0 on the other side. So our goal here is to find out where the y equals 0, in other words, where it hits the x-axis. And if you can find those x-intercepts, you've found your answers to the quadratic equation. So the upshot's pretty simple here. You graph it and find out where it crosses the x-axis. Now those locations, those x-intercepts, are called zeros, and they're also called roots. Now the one we're going to hone in on is this 0 here. They're called zeros, but if I highlight them, those locations are x values that really aren't 0. So why would they call them zeros? Well, you can see that right next to it is a y value that's consistently 0 there. So they're called zeros not because the x actually equals 0 there, but those x values that we're looking for are called zeros because the associated y value is equal to 0. Now, the upshot of this is really pretty easy here. What we're going to be doing here is we're going to be graphing it and finding out where it crosses the x-axis. I think I mentioned that already. So here's one that's already graphed for us. We're actually trying to solve this equation that's right up here. And so instead, we go to our y equals key and we graph this on our calculator. And we find out where it hits the x-axis. Well, one of the zeros is at 2. And you can see that that's actually the point 2, 0, which is why we nickname it as 0. And that's one of our answers. And the other one is over on this side, and at least from appearances, it looks like it's x equal negative 1. So that's the other 0. Now, we've already got the graph printed in front of us. So how do you do this on your calculator? Okay, I'll have to describe that to you. All right, to find the answers to number 10 using your graphing calculator only, you're going to start by graphing the function. And that means you'll hit the y equals key to start with. That's at the top left-hand corner of your TI-84. And then you'll type in the expression, x squared minus 1x minus 2. And usually counsel students to use the Zoom 6 feature. which is a standard screen settings. And you should get something similar to what's shown over here. You'll get a parabola that crosses the x-axis somewhere near the origin. You can see that it'll be similar to what shows here, although the scale will be a little different. Okay, next you're going to tell the calculator to try and find those x-intercepts. And the key sequence is this. You hit your second function, which is the blue key on a TI-84. And then you're going to hit the calc choice, and you'll find it as the printed right above the trace key at the top right of your calculator. And then you're going to go to option number 2, which says zeros, or 0, I don't remember which. And what will happen is your calculator will ask you for a left bound. And let me explain what we're going to be doing here, and then I'll tell you what to do. So we're going to try and find this left-hand answer here first. And when it says left bound, it wants you to take the cursor using the left arrow. So use the left arrow and take your cursor somewhere over here to the left of that solution. Once you got your cursor on that side of it, hit enter, and your calculator now wants you to give a right bound. So you're going to have to take your calculator and go the other way till you're somewhere over here on the right-hand side of it, and hit enter. Your calculator will say guess. You can usually ignore that by hitting the enter key once more. And if all goes well, it'll say x equals -1 and y equals 0. And you found your first x-intercept. Now you're going to go through the same process again to find the other one. You go, hang on, let me get it all straightened out here. Okay, we're going to find the other one over here. So you go second, calc, and once again, that's above the trace key at the top right of your calculator. Choice number 2, which either says 0 or zeros, I can't remember which. And when it says left bound, you want to move your cursor till it's somewhere over here, a little bit to the left of that x-intercept. Hit enter. And now it wants you to go to the right side. It says right bound. So you take it somewhere over here on the right-hand side of the answer. Hit enter. And then when it says guess, you just hit enter once more, and it should pop right to that x equals 2. And you've got both answers. All right, so let's talk you through the next problem here. What you're going to do is go to your y equals key, type in the new function. Choose a standard window by saying zoom 6. And you should get a parabola that cuts through the graph at approximately 2.5 there and about -2 there. So you can kind of guess at the answers. Okay, we're going to find the one on the left first. And you do that by going second, calc, which is the second function on the trace key, and then go to choice 2 where it says zeros, or 0, I can't remember which. And it'll go to the screen and say left bound, and it wants you to lead it somewhere over here to the left of that first answer. Hit enter, and then move to the right when it asks for a right bound, somewhere down in this area on the parabola. And hit enter again, and ignore the guess by hitting enter again, and it should pop to, I believe, -2. So your first, hang on, let me get this right here. Your first 0 is -2. And once again, it's called a zero not because it actually is zero, but because the associated y value is equal to 0. Okay, now for the other one, on the other side here, this one, we're going to take a little shortcut. Instead of using our left and right arrows to move the cursor back and forth when it asks for a left and right bound, we're just going to type in a number that's a little to the left and a little to the right. So you can see that this is about 2.5. I'm going to use 1 as my left bound and 5 as my right bound. And there's nothing magical about that, just a little bit to the left and a little bit to the right. And when the time comes, I'm going to use those. Okay, so second, calc, choice 2. It should say left bound. You're going to type a 1 and an enter. And now it'll ask for a right bound. You're going to say 5 and enter. And then when it says guess, hit enter once more. And I'm going off memory here. It's not a good idea to guess here, but I'm hoping I'm right here. I think it's 2.5 is my second answer there. Okay, so the two answers are -2 and +2.5. Okay, just to close this out here, I want you to go to your y equals key and type in this function. Then type zoom 6 to get the standard screen going on. And you can see that the parabola never has any x-intercepts. It doesn't cross the x-axis. So you're going to write, I think we did this earlier in the notes, you're going to say no real solution. And the solutions, there are some, are imaginary numbers, and you're going to have to wait till section 2.6, or excuse me, 5.6, to learn about that, and I can't wait. That's my favorite section in all of Algebra 2. All right, guys, I hope this helps you, and I'll try and help you when I get back. Hope you enjoyed my dog whining in the background of a few of these videos, and I hope this really helps you.